We seek precise solutions for the continued use of legacy systems and, where appropriate, development of required applications. Real ID has grown thanks to the port and maritime industry's safety and security needs. Each of our modules are managed by a simulated artificial intelligence called Soleil, capable of learning scenarios and finding solutions according to the end user's requirements. For questions and comments, please use the chat located in the center of the bottom of your screen. The webinar will begin momentarily. Real ID is a passionate and committed team. Through entertainment technology, we contribute to our clients' social and professional development. We offer a comprehensive service that responds to new challenges and has established our active international presence. We provide our clients with the right balance between their needs and our platform's optimal performance. We seek precise solutions for the continued use of legacy systems and, where appropriate, development of required applications. Real ID has grown thanks to the port and maritime industry's safety and security needs. Each of our modules are managed by a simulated artificial intelligence called Soleil, capable of learning scenarios and finding solutions according to the end user's requirements. For your convenience, please turn your cameras and microphones off during the webinar. The webinar will begin momentarily. Real ID is a passionate and committed team. Through entertainment technology, we contribute to our clients' social and professional development. We offer a comprehensive service that responds to new challenges and has established our active international presence. We provide our clients with the right balance between their needs and our platform's optimal performance. We seek precise solutions for the continued use of legacy systems and, where appropriate, development of required applications. Real ID has grown thanks to the port and maritime industry's safety and security needs. Each of our modules are managed by a simulated artificial intelligence called Soleil, capable of learning scenarios and finding solutions according to the end user's requirements. Hello, and welcome to this webinar, operated and sponsored by Real ID. For your convenience, please turn your cameras and microphones off during the webinar. Real ID is a passionate and committed team. Through entertainment technology, we contribute to our clients' social and professional development. We offer a comprehensive service that responds to new challenges and has established our active international presence. We provide our clients with the right balance between their needs and our platform's optimal performance. We seek precise solutions for the continued use of legacy systems and, where appropriate, development of required applications. Real ID has grown thanks to the port and maritime industry's safety and security needs. Each of our modules are managed by a simulated artificial intelligence called Sole, capable of learning scenarios and finding solutions according to the end user's requirements. Por su comodidad, por favor mantenga cámaras y micrófonos apagados durante el evento. La comunicación queda abierta en el área de chat, ubicada en la parte central inferior de esta plataforma. En este instante comenzamos.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. My name is Jorge Duran, and I am the chief of the Secretariat for the Inter-American Committee on Ports of the Organization of American States. Today, we have a great webinar planned for you all. And if Ms. Lucenti and Mr. Ashby and Ms. Swoboda could please turn on their cameras, I'd be very grateful. As we know, today's webinar is designed around international financing organizations, specifically the Caribbean Development Bank, represented here by Mr. William Ashby, Portfolio Manager for Economic Infrastructure Division. And we will also have the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, represented here by Ms. Krista Lucenti, who is the Caribbean Trade Portfolio Coordinator. So these are the folks that we needed in this webinar, and I thank them for their time. I thank them for sharing their expertise and supporting our work. The objective of today's webinar is to put forth to you all in one way or another what current or what projects, port development projects, are these two institutions supporting, and importantly, what can you do if you think you want to approach these institutions for support. It is important that I credit that we have 36 countries registered for today's webinar, and we have registrations from Argentina, Barbados, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, France, Germany, Grenada, Guadeloupe, of France and the Caribbean, Guatemala, Guyana, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, the Netherlands, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Martin, the French part, Spain, Suriname, Switzerland, Trinidad and Tobago, the United States, Uruguay, and Venezuela. So certainly the event caused interest by the community, and they've all signed up. I will remind everyone that we will go ahead and have the presentations. There will be a space for questions and answers at the end of the session. And I'd like to also thank Mona Swoboda from the SIP Secretariat, who will be moderating this panel. So again, welcome everyone. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Mona as the moderator so that she can introduce our speakers properly and we get on with it. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, William. Thank you, Mona. And again, thank everyone for being present. I already see many institutions or many representatives of institutions, of national port authorities, of private ports, terminals here in the roster list. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think this will be a highly interesting event, and I'm very, very much looking forward to the presentations. And with that, Mona, please take it away. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for your wonderful opening remarks, as always. Yes, you said 36 countries. I think that's a fantastic turnout. We are currently a little bit over 40 folks here in the meeting room, but many viewers also on our live stream on YouTube. So we're very, very excited that there is this interest in this topic, and we're very excited to dive right into our first presentation by Mr. William Ashby from the Caribbean Development Bank. He is the portfolio manager in the projects department at the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, where his role includes the oversight of transport sector activities in the bank's economic infrastructure division. He has led multidisciplinary teams responsible for the preparation and appraisal of projects proposed for bank financing and the provision of support to borrowing member countries for the implementation of bank-financed projects. He is a chartered engineer, a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and a fellow of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation. At the SIP, we're always excited to be, joining spaces and sharing spaces with our colleagues from the Caribbean Development Bank. We're currently implementing a project funded by the CDB in Belize for an electronic single window, which is the third technical assistance project that the SIP is implementing in member states, thanks to the financial support from our friends and colleagues at the Caribbean Development Bank. So it's always a pleasure sharing a space with you, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, William, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mona. And good morning, everyone. I have to say, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. And as Mona said, my colleagues at CDB have a long working relationship with the SIP. So it's great to be here, and thank you for inviting us. So as you heard, I'm a civil engineer. I work in the economic infrastructure division of the bank. And as I go through the presentation, I'll show you a little bit about how we're set up. I'll go through and just speak a little bit as well about some of the initiatives we've been working on recently that pertain to port infrastructure. And you will have plenty opportunity to pose any questions at the end of the presentations. So in case you're not familiar, some of you will be and some might not be, the Caribbean Development Bank is a multilateral development bank serving at present 19 borrowing member countries in the Caribbean.
William, sorry to interrupt you. Will you be sharing your screen?
I thought I was, so let me try again. Let me try again. Okay.
There we go, looking good. And then if you could just hop in on the presentation mode.
Yes. Okay. So
awesome. We see your slide of strategic objectives.
Yeah.
There we go. Awesome. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
So to reset a bit, I was saying we've got 19 borrowing member countries at present. There are also 9 other non-borrowing member countries And the significance is that all of our borrowing member countries, for all of the procurement opportunities available under the projects we finance, persons from those countries, firms from those countries are always eligible to participate. The projects go towards the beneficiaries in the borrowing member countries. I mentioned at the beginning, I'd talk a little bit about how we're set up. So the projects department falls within the operations area of the bank. I work in economic infrastructure, as I said, and we work very closely with colleagues across all of these divisions. We work in multidisciplinary teams. So my colleagues in the private sector division include trade specialists, and they in the regional corporation and integration unit would have worked a lot with Mona and the SIP group on a number of initiatives, as she mentioned, and with other partners in borrowing member countries on initiatives that include the development of maritime single windows, and I'll show you the development of a port community system in one of the borrowing member countries that's been on our implementation list. So all of the work that we do falls under 5 strategic objectives, principally building social resilience, building production resilience, building financial resilience, building environmental, and building institutional resilience. And pretty much the work in the transport sector touches on each one of these. It's not going to be a surprise to you that the instruments available for financing these projects are pretty similar to the instruments across a number of the multilateral agencies. Of great interest nowadays is climate financing. So we leverage our relationships with a number of development partners to provide concessional climate financing to support our projects. Technical assistance through grants and use of funds. That's also something that's of tremendous import in advancing the work in the sector. And when it comes to infrastructure, generally is through the loan financing product. That's what's generally utilized to fund large infrastructure projects. I must say as well, though, grant financing under the United Kingdom Caribbean Infrastructure Partnerships Fund has been used to help to support one of the main projects going on at the moment. That's the redevelopment of the Kingstown port in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So as transportation and communication, that's one sector that is, let's say, about a quarter of the bank's financing since inception has been dedicated to that sector. And at the moment in the active portfolio, most of the project work is in that sector. The themes in the transport sector work we implement are shown here. And they're very much aligned with the themes under our strategic objectives. So building environmental resilience features there heavily, providing social accessibility and mobility, the importance of good governance and planning. It crosses all of the transport modes, and the maritime transport area is no different. Data and analytics, getting our countries more up to speed with using these tools for decision making, and not just for decision making in terms of policy, but also in respect of the design of infrastructure and the management of infrastructure. That's terribly important. So some of the key activities in the sector undertaken by the bank, and generally across the bank, regardless of sector really. The preparation of investment projects and the supervision of investment projects by bank staff. That's pretty much most of the effort in projects department is towards that area. And we've got, as I said, across a whole number of sectors, but transportation is one of the main ones under the economic infrastructure area, but also in the social sector area. And the port sector and maritime transport, again, across economic infrastructure and colleagues in the private sector division. Technical assistance for capacity building and master planning, also a huge aspect of the work that we undertake, and largely in our area. We are responsible for helping our countries undertake the pre-investment studies, including climate risks and vulnerability assessments, environmental and social impact assessments, design studies, and such investigations necessary to prepare investment projects. The development of sector studies and other knowledge products, that's also a key area of work for us. And again, there we cross with other boundary partners in the operations area. And I'll mention there the economics department, and they have been key in developing some of the knowledge products the bank has disseminated in this area. So there is a seminal bit of work assessing the competitiveness and efficiency of the port sector, which they did. And just, I know that's still relied on heavily across the sector. And just recently, they produced some work on logistics in 2 of our borrowing member countries. So I'll mention that later in the presentation as well. And the challenges across the sector are pretty well known. Jorge alluded to the need for the countries to comply with the requirements of the FAL Convention and the implementation of maritime single windows by the start of 2024, and work going on in that regard. But overall, the lack of technologically driven processes, that really is one of the constraints in the sector. Vulnerability to disaster and climate risks is another. And some of these others, everyone working across the sector would be quite familiar with the growth internationally, the trend towards larger ships and the challenges that presents in terms of one, the cascading effect in terms of cargo and the vessels transporting cargo even to our region, and the constraints it presents with regard to the actual facilities that are needed to serve these vessels across the region. In some of our ports, there's definitely a conflict that, again, port managers will be very aware of with regard to cruise ships and cargo ships. Often, priority is given to cruise vessels, and cargo vessels have to wait, creating additional time delays and additional costs impacting the entire economies of these countries. So, and one thing that's in another recent report produced by the bank, the limited dedicated port facilities for handling intra-regional cargo, especially agricultural products, that has also emerged as a key challenge in this sector. I'm going to skip over these except to mention the training gaps, and the Port Management Association of the Caribbean. Their members have often over recent years, I'll say, mentioned the need to improve training. And there's a lot of work with the Caribbean Maritime University to improve the skills, the competencies of persons working in the sector, to provide certification for them. And our social sector area, education and training is one of the main focus areas of the social sector division. So we're keen to work with our partners across the sector in this area as well. And our raison d'etre is helping our countries to access affordable financing. So much of the effort of the bank is dedicated to that particular activity as well. Now, some of the initiatives that we've been undertaking in recent years, I mentioned this first one already, the work in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the modernization of the port at Kingstown. So that is one of the largest projects that's ongoing in the bank at the moment. I believe pretty much all of the procurement opportunities have been advertised already, and progress on the infrastructure seems to be quite satisfactory. There was a lot of work there with regard to land reclamation and so on, and that's been completed. And I know buildings are now being erected on the site. So it wasn't just an infrastructure project, of course. There was a lot of work with regard to the assessment of the capacity of the institution, the Port Authority, going on there, and recommendations produced in terms of reforms that the Port Authority might wish to consider, such that by the time it's had delivered this brand new port, its operations are also compatible with maximizing efficiency. And again, the SIP participated, I believe, in that operational assessment for the Kingstown port. Social impact was pretty key there as well, as that work called for the relocation of project affected persons, and actually the work done in that area provides an example for projects across many different sectors. We've also got work ongoing and construction actually underway as well for the port in Montserrat, and other types of work that we do that pretty much impacts on the sector, though not directly port related, include work in sea defenses. Talk about the digital thing already. I'll mention one technical assistance project we have been working on with the government of Jamaica, and it includes coastal protection as well as some urban development work around the port at Kingston. So the creation of a multi-use path around the port, which will also help to support development of MSMEs and provide lots of other benefits. So that's something quite important for us. In terms of knowledge products, as I mentioned, the colleagues in regional cooperation and integration have been leading work on a study of the maritime service provided to improve agricultural trade and food security to meet that 25 by 25 goal. And economics, I mentioned the logistics chain study undertaken for Grenada and St. Lucia. And that is the end of the presentation. I'll just invite persons interested in exploring the procurement opportunities to monitor our website and see the procurement link there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, William. If you could be so kind and stop sharing your screen. I hope everyone had a chance to write down William's contact information. If not, we will be, of course, happy to share it later on. The presentations will, of course, be available on the portal SIP. A fantastic presentation, William. I'm especially happy to see that the Kingstown Port Modernization Project is going on so successfully here at the SIP. We were able to support that project with a institutional and operational assessment, I believe, back in 2019. That was a study, so to speak, in preparation for the modernization project of the Port of Kingstown, together with our colleagues at Hudson Analytics, of course. So very, very excited to see that is moving forward so successfully. And of course, we're so happy to see that transportation is one of the key areas for the bank. And we just congratulate you for being such a committed development partner in the region. So thank you very much, William. I see there's already a question for you in the chat, but we'll get to that later in the Q&A session. I would now like to pass it on over to my good friend and dear colleague, Dr. Krista Lucenti, who is a true change maker in the region as well as it relates to transportation infrastructure and port digitalization technical systems projects. So we're very, very much looking forward to her presentation. Dr. Crisa Lucenti is the coordinator of the trade and investment portfolio in the Caribbean and in Peru at the Inter-American Development Bank. This consists of designing and monitoring the bank's operational portfolio of lending and grant projects focused on maritime transport and logistics, trade facilitation, trade single windows, and investment attraction. Dr. Lucenti is a subject lead on the implementation of port community systems and smart ports in the wider Latin American and Caribbean region. And prior to joining the bank, Dr. Lucenti worked at the World Bank in Geneva and at several investment banks in London. Crista, it is as always a pleasure having you, and I pass it on over to you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mona, for your kind words, and many thanks to all of you for joining in today. I hope you can see my screen. I'm going to start first.
Great.
I want to preface by saying that I think William did a good job of explaining a little bit how our institutions are established. I'm just going to do a very quick institutional slide, and just to say perhaps how we're a little different from the Caribbean Development Bank is that we have a private sector arm, so we're structured more like the World Bank and the IFC. So we have the IDB, which provides sovereign guaranteed loans to the 26 borrowing states of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as IDB Invest, who has roughly the same membership of countries, but provides development support through private sector financing in key strategic areas. And then we have what is known as our innovation laboratory, IDB Lab, that works with grants and works directly for the private sector. Within the integration and trade sector, of which I'm a part of, we work primarily on trade facilitation and logistics, export promotion, investment attraction agreements, trade agreements, for instance, and institutions for integration and trade. And we also host business forums and networks. So I wanted to start with a little overview of some of the trends in Latin America in the maritime sector. And William mentioned some of these, and perhaps I'll try and skip those and focus on some of the others. Sorry, this is a little bit wordy, but I wanted to make sure I got everything in there. Most of our ports in the region remain pure cargo handling centers without a holistic version of their role in global supply chains as nodes, right? So many of those that have that kind of innovative perspective are those that are operated by global operators. Many of the countries have trade single windows for processing the administration processes for international trade, but few of those are connected to other management systems, customs, terminal operating systems, etc. There's been a limited adoption of green technologies, some by IDB Invest in Bahamas, for instance, in energy efficient lighting. Smart port solutions are really embryonic, so we do have some work that we've been doing, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but on port community systems, on other types of the use of drones by customs, but really a lot of it is in early stages. Many of the countries in the region have limited capital to invest in infrastructure, which makes the digitalization agenda super important because of the returns that you have on that investment. Port governments remain centralized and highly bureaucratic, and you have a great variation with the mandate and the function of our port authorities in the region. There's still weak cooperation between the institutions involved in trade and limited trust. Unfortunately, we still see a lot of adversarial port-city relationships that we've been trying to support through urban logistics and better urban planning. And I see I went off the thing here. But anyway, this point is related to skills development and human capital. And William mentioned that, which is super important. We have a new project in Jamaica where we're working on skills development in the logistics sector. So we're seeing interest in smart port implementation because of some of those pressures to retain the direct calls, to reduce operating costs. And many of these countries who want to tap into friendshoring trends or participation in regional global value chains, regional and global value chain, we're seeing that they realize that port investment is really a necessary condition. And as well, the adoption of these technologies to comply with climate change agreements, Paris alignment, etc. That's been a real driving trend for us. However, we're still seeing that there is some financial and institutional limitations that could restrict growth. So you have the weakness in the capacity in port authorities to implement technology solutions. You have scarce financial resources. In particular, many port authorities would not control their own budgets. So these budgets would come from ministries of finance to the ministries of transport, who then would allocate, what the port authorities would get. So even without any independent sources of revenue, and some of those port authorities have them, but without them, they're really quite limited in how they can invest. So we try and provide some grant resources for them. For some solutions like PCS, going out to the market, we're really seeing very few firms offering port community system development or maritime single windows or trade single windows. So the implementation cost at this moment seems to be exceeding some of the revenue generating potential. So we need to find some creative solutions to that challenge right now. And then one of the last issues I think that is important is that, rather than focusing specifically on institutional reform, it's kind of sidestepped by investment in technology. And I think, you just end up kicking the ball down the road. So what are some of the things that we've been working on? In my team, we've been working a lot on the technology platforms. So implementation of port community systems, which I'm sure many of you are already aware of. We have lending programs, because like the Caribbean Development Bank, we have our primary financial instruments, our sovereign guaranteed loans. We have some technical assistance that is provided through grant resources, and we have other types of financing instruments. Those are the two primary ones. And so the port community systems are financed through IDB operations, IDB loans, but we also provide to not just these countries that I've named here, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Argentina, but some other countries where we've provided grant monies for readiness assessments and community building for the port community system, which, as many of you know, is either makes or breaks any type of port technology investment, right, is really the strength and the continuity of the port community. These are just some of the financial savings. So as well, we've done a lot of research in this area. You can look on our website. You'll see publications on port community systems, on port innovation ecosystems, on maritime single windows. So I invite you to take a look at some of those. Some of the other things we've done recently, this is with the technical cooperation using grant resources, is that we provided some technical advice with regards to implementation of national maritime single windows, which many of you know is a requirement from the IMO for January 2024. And in addition, we provided some recommendations in the design of a regional maritime single window. And we, continue to work with those countries to see how that can be implemented in a way in which makes the most sense for that country. We also are financing port call optimization systems, which many of you know is a huge issue at the moment in trying to better create to exchange information to permit just-in-time arrivals. Thereby reducing the time and reducing the emissions that the ship is actually contributing to our environment. One of the things that I'm looking at piloting now are green and digital, what we're calling green and digital maritime corridors. And it's modeled on what's been happening in Long Beach, what is going on with Rotterdam and in Singapore, where they've made an agreement to try to partner to realize the zero or near zero emission shipping between those two ports. So they've agreed to share port and vessel information, such as arrival and departure timing, and using international standards. And they're both promoting the use of electronic bills of lading, which is, again, another very important issue for globally, the exchange of certificates of origin and SPS certificates, just-in-time planning. What's interesting about this, I think, is that it's really this mix of logistics planning or systems that support logistics planning with the administrative side, so the certificates of origin and SPS certificates. And then one of the other things would be kind of taking a look at data collaboration between hubs and spokes on advanced vessel and cargo information that would enable pre-clearance, right? And at the end of the day, that improves risk management, and it also improves the planning. Let's say in Kingston, where you could coordinate the feeder vessels, and that would save equipment and emissions. And then lastly, taking a look at the interoperability of maritime single windows, which between ports that are sharing service calls to allow for the port clearance data and departure and arrival data allow for that better planning, as well as the emissions reductions. So some of the other development projects that are being done in the bank by some of my colleagues, where I'm a member of the team but not leading, where we have a team that supports the structuring of PPPs, not just for terminal operations, but also for other types of private investment. And that's done through non-reimbursable grant monies, or it's done through contingent recovery through the concession. So we pay up front for the service of structuring the PPP, and that's then recoverable through the concession. We've also been supporting development of public policy frameworks to enhance investments in sustainable transportation. We have projects to generate better data for transport systems. We have sovereign lending projects that are working towards modernizing the infrastructure, the superstructure, and the technology infrastructure of the Port of Acajutla in El Salvador. We also are supporting updating of port and maritime policies, as well as port master plans, and we either do that through reimbursable technical cooperations or non-reimbursable. And then lastly, we work on institutional strengthening, which is a really a key issue for us moving forward, and how we better support port authorities and other institutions involved in international trade in technology adoption. These are some future areas of work that we're doing. So looking at how we can connect airports and other transport modes to a port community system, so a port of entry community system, as opposed to a maritime port. We're also looking at smart ports, smart airports. So in Costa Rica, so we're doing something similar to what we did before in smart ports a couple of years ago, which is to develop a methodology by which a country or an airport can actually measure or map the flow of goods that arrive into an airport through all the processes, and then you can provide recommendations to improve those. We've been working, we did a publication on port innovation ecosystems, and I'd like to see how we can implement some of that going forward. There are some great examples from the region, primarily Delta X at the Port of Cartagena. We've been working a lot on risk management and principles and customs for many years, but we like to see more of that in ports and airports, green ports and green logistics. Obviously, the decarbonization agenda is a large one, big one for us. And then in general, coordinated border management at all ports of entry. So just some closing remarks. I'd just like to say that in general, from our perspective, ports need to become more service oriented. So improving the port efficiency, adopting technology, harvesting data for business intelligence and data-driven policy making, investing in people, upskilling, reskilling, and adopting smart governance practices, decentralization, collaboration, security, innovation, transparency. And technology alone is not going to create a smart community. So you need to adopt proactive and reactive cybersecurity policies, improve port governance, update port legislation, maritime policy. Some of these date back to the 1960s in many countries. And cultural change is really what's needed. Cooperation and collaboration between port actors, public and private, as well as port to ports in order to accrue the benefits. I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I'm open to any questions you might have. Many thanks.
No, thanks to you, Krista. This was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for those takeaways. I was taking note over here, and then I remembered, wait, we will share your presentation. So I didn't have to take all those notes, but those were fantastic takeaways. Thank you for also providing us a bit of a more technical perspective. And again, congratulations to you and the colleagues at the IDB for all the work that you do. Also, in terms of capacity building, I know there's currently a port community system course that the IDB is organizing. I'm taking it. So I don't know if it's still open for folks to enroll. If maybe we can drop the information here in the chat. I think that's initiatives like that, capacity building initiatives, are so complementary to these technical assistance projects that you're doing. So thank you very much. We see here Hans is saying the training course is great. I agree. I am taking it as well, and it's really fantastic. So it's wonderful to see this approach that is work capacity building. The cultural change that you speak of goes hand in hand with the technical assistance projects that you're implementing. So congratulations to you. I would like to invite William back to our virtual stage for the Q&A session. And again, thank you, Krista. Thank you, William. Thank you both so much for your very insightful presentations. William, you mentioned in your presentation 2 elements that are required within the Caribbean, or within the Caribbean development, and that is data and institutional capacity. And how would you address both of these in relation to the port sector?
Okay, thanks for that question, Mona. So I in my presentation, alluded to part of that as well when I mentioned the work that the SIP did on some of, well, certainly on the Kingston port so far. And I won't mention the other country, but I know we're engaging with you at the moment on doing a similar work for another port in our borrowing member countries. So with regard to the port sector, in particular, the conduct of those types of assessments as a precursor to the investment in capital projects is one of the huge things for us. So that's certainly something we would do. When gaps are identified through those studies, I mentioned our collaboration across the bank in the different areas that deal with education and training and have greater expertise in that area. Our colleagues who lead work in the development of information technology systems and so on, we would collaborate with them and also engage. I'll refer here to one of the other questions I see there. We definitely engage with the private sector in procuring the services to develop our borrowing member countries. So getting that expertise to help to strengthen the individual ports when we're working with them, but also working on a regional level in addressing things like data issues, the work in developing knowledge products. And often, again, we will go out to the market to engage consultants who have expertise in the particular area to help to build some of that data repository to help with work. But at the moment, it's still there are lots of gaps, which we know from our various studies and reports that exist, and we'll work with our countries to fill those gaps.
Fantastic. Thank you, William. Yes, I think it's important what you mentioned to kind of, have this initial assessment, a feasibility study. Like you said, we're currently working together on that in one of our member countries to kind of see what is the baseline and then really provide a targeted solution, targeted technical assistance that really addresses those gaps and also is considerate of certain strengths that exist. because, we have to make sure that we also play to institutional strengths and build on those where there may be some gaps. So thank you very much for that. Krista, my next question is for you. And then we'll get back to the question in the chat. I know William already answered parts of it, but there was another part of that question that I would like to ask you both later on. Krista, with the cost of infrastructure being so high and the fiscal space being limited for investment, how can ports continue to modernize their operations?
Thanks for that question, Mona. I think there are really two ways, and I mentioned these during the presentation. The first is that, using the available resources that you have to improve technology and to improve skills. And these two really go hand in hand. You cannot simply implement a technology project when you do not have people skilled to be able to participate during the development of that project and then to maintain and operate that system. So irrespective of that limited fiscal space, and we know that exists, it's been very difficult for some of the small ports in our region in particular, who find it difficult to attract an international operator to their ports due to volumes or location, etc., to be able to accommodate the larger ships in order to maintain direct calls. So what you're seeing a lot in the Caribbean is that you now have 2-3 transshipments that are happening. And that's because many of those ports just haven't been able to make the investment to be able to accommodate a direct call from Miami or even from Kingston, some of them. So I think one of the challenges for those smaller ports is really, okay, how do we leverage the resources that we have? And we think, and the best way to do that is to improve those trade facilitation processes, right? To improve the performance of your agencies at the border, customs, health and quarantine, for example, and the port authorities, of course, as well as implementing step by step those technology processes while ensuring that you are reskilling and upskilling the people that are eventually going to be using those systems.
Right. Thank you, Krista. I think you make a very important point, and you also mentioned that earlier on in your takeaways, is the human factor. It's really such a critical component, not only in terms of, a lot of these, especially digitalization, technological transformation projects, they are change management initiatives at the end of the day, and they require people to implement the change. A lot of them involve process reengineering, business reengineering, and it just requires a different way of doing business in, like you said, a more service-oriented way. So thank you very much for highlighting the importance of building capacity, developing capacity, institutional capacity, human capacity to accommodate these changes. So thank you very much for that. Next question is for William. Are there, and Krista mentioned it in her presentation as well, the trend of, green operations, green shipping. You mentioned climate resiliency of the transport infrastructure. So are there specific budgets and financing programs for enhancing the climate resiliency of the transport infrastructure?
Okay, so at CDB is an accredited entity under the Green Climate Fund. So that's one great opportunity there for the ports in our borrowing member countries and generally operators in the sector to access funding to build a resilience. So at the moment, projects up to $50 million we're accredited to take to the GCF. So we invite interest there. The Adaptation Fund, we accredited there as well for projects up to 20 million. So if there are nature-based solutions that can be incorporated into building climate resilience in the port sector, they would be eligible to access funding from the Adaptation Fund. And I mentioned before, CDB is generally, we consider ourselves a small bank, and we very much leverage our partnerships with other development partners to be more effective across our borrowing member countries. So through the European Investment Bank, we had a previous line of credit, the Climate Action line of credit. We've still got projects being implemented under that, which provided interest rate subsidies on our ordinary capital resources. So that helped to make funding more affordable. We have just entered a new line of financing with the Agence Française de Développement, the French Development Agency, so that provides some as well. And CDB's own special development funds for countries that are eligible there, that provides very affordable financing that can go towards building climate resilience in our boring member countries. So I hope that that helps. And again, we invite specific interest. You can contact us to learn more.
Fantastic. So there are many cooperation opportunities. That's wonderful. It's certainly a priority for the industry. That's for sure. Krista, I have one last question for you, and then I will address the question here in the chat, and I'll invite you both to give us your comments. Krista, how can port authorities and other agencies that are involved in international trade balance their ambition with their institutional capacity to deliver on the complex technological projects?
Thanks for the question, Mona. One of the challenges that we are encountering in the region and many of our programs is that, you know, the country wants a Rolls Royce, but it's really not at a stage yet where it can implement all of the various services, incorporate all of the various entities that it wants to incorporate. And so what we're trying to do now, and I think a lot of this is really, you know, learning from experience of implementing many of these, not just port-related projects, but technology-related projects for at least the last 10, 15 years, is that, and I'll address one specific one, which is the port community system. I mean, this is something that needs to be implemented in phases, because what we've seen in the region is that there's been a lot of ambition to include multiple services all at once, to effectively like go to the store and to pick up your Microsoft Office and to take it home and to have all of the various features that Microsoft Office has, and to have it within 2-3 years. And I think, you know, part of our job as the IDB is learning from implementation of a project like the PCS to know that, okay, you know, going forward, we need to do this in phases, right? Maybe we're just doing exports, maybe we're just doing imports, maybe we're just doing transshipment, maybe we're just offering 3 services to begin with, and we continue to grow and grow, and we phase it as and when the capacity in the institution for operating it, as well as the interest and the value associated with the system becomes known to the other institutions and to the private sector, right? So you continue to build on your successes. So I think that's one of the things that we have been recommending, is to take it in bite sizes. I know everyone wants to deliver everything all at once, but what we've seen is that even the most advanced ports, even the most modern terminals still have not been able to deliver technology platforms and projects in the time in which they really set out to do them. And I see Hans Rook here, and certainly, you know, he has much experience in implementing port community systems, and would probably agree with this approach. We've spoken much about it, but I think in general that's how you know that's how we would recommend and work with our partners, who incidentally are those 26 borrowing members of the IDB of Latin America and the Caribbean. And to work with us, you have to be one of the 48 member countries of the IDB in general, which also includes, you know, Europe and Canada and the United States, etc. So that's kind of the people that need to, or if you're looking to work with us, that's where you have to come from.
Awesome. You're segueing perfect into the final question that I have here for you two, and maybe you can answer first while we're at it, and then I'll pass it on over to William. And that is a question from Gonzalo, who is asking, Who or from where are you obtaining the technical expertise? And do you have professionals within your structure or through third parties? We already spoke, William, that CDB through collaboration with us, with the SIP and our partners, other entities such as Hudson Analytics, we've collaborated on some technical assistance projects. But I'll pass it on over to Krista, because I understand that you also at the IDB have certain technical capacities. We'll pass it over to you.
Yes, of course, many of us have some technical expertise in transport, let's say in port infrastructure, many engineers, many economists, but we, of course, need third-party consultants to work with us. So as long as you are based in one of the 48 member states of the IDB, and you can take a look at our website to see whose those are, then anytime there is a procurement opportunity, then you would be welcome to apply for those. The other comment I see there, the question is really related to, like, how do you find out about it, or can you present your solutions to us? Of course, absolutely. My suggestion would be to identify or try to identify who the person in the IDB might be that is working on your particular area, and to reach out to that person. And often we organize meetings with third-party vendors who want to present to us. It doesn't mean that you will gain any advantage in a procurement process, and it doesn't mean that we can recommend you to our borrowing members who might have IDB loans, because they're going to go through a whole separate procurement process and confidential and independent from the IDB. But it's always good to be able to identify new vendors, new consultants in the market, because as I said earlier, we found that it's a very narrow pool and we're always looking for more competition. So, feel free, if it's something that I'm working on, reach out to me. And, if it's not me, then I'll try and direct you in the right way.
Awesome. Thank you, Krista. Well noted. William, what about you? What about the folks at CDB?
Great. That's a good question. So as Krista said, similarly, CDB has technical specialists across these various ranges, and I'll particularly flag our energy specialists. I didn't mention them much in my presentation, but they are leading work across the region, really, in the transformation to renewable energy sources, and in engagement with the port sector. We've had them participate in dialogue from time to time as well. But more generally, what I want to say is what the specialists help to do in mobilizing the support of the private sector is to work with our clients in designing terms of reference to say exactly what service the port or the borrowing member country is trying to have performed. So that scope of services and designing terms of reference, this is a key part of the support the bank specialists are able to provide. And then as the country works through that procurement process and they engage consultants to work on any particular area, then our specialists help them in supervising the conduct of those consultancies as well. So where the particular agency in the country might be limited in the range of technical expertise that they might have, bank staff are then able to help them in the supervision activities. And again, then just to touch on the eligibility, where I talked about partnerships and working with the Agence Française and with the European Investment Bank and many others, the eligibility stipulations that go along with that financing then apply. So we are able then to broaden the procurement opportunities to persons and firms that are eligible for procurement opportunities under those individual organizations when they are also working on CDB-funded projects. So I think that helps to answer that question. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you. I think we're wrapping up here with an invitation, to join this community of development partners, to make sure that we share knowledge, we share resources where we can. to benefit the development of our port sector, port and maritime transport sector in our region. So I thank you all very much for the time, for your excellent presentations. There are a couple more questions here that I see from folks. I see you, Darren, over there. As we're wrapping up, what I would do is I will take note of these questions and then send them over to Krista and Williams for their response or their comments, if they have any. I know some questions are a little bit more technical. So I will do that and make sure that we answer the questions that way as we're wrapping up right now. So I would like to thank you again, Krista. It's always wonderful having you. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing in the region. William, it's always great seeing you. We've crossed many paths. So thank you again both so much. And I will hand it back to Jorge for the closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mona, and thank you both, Krista and William, as well as the very active participation of the audience. At this juncture, like Mona said, we're gonna take those and get them to the speakers on a one-to-one basis. Thank you very, very much again to both of you for sharing your knowledge, for sharing and please turn on your cameras, William and Krista. There we go, because now I'm going to give you the floor to say a quick wrapping thoughts and hello. However, here's my two bits. I think that Mona made and emphasized the point made by Krista about that we're talking about with these development technological based projects is that we're talking about change. We're talking about the redesign of the process itself. Uploading the current forms to the internet doesn't solve the problem. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about designing and re-engineering that process itself for an online real-time format. And so this is tough. Humans and institutions are naturally resistant to change, which is why a lot of awareness training needs to be done. Human resource capacity building training, as you both pointed out, is essential for these technology projects to work. I also agree that this must be, or it is recommendable to do on a stage by stage, or what did Krista say, phase, in different phases, because as you implement one process and one service, you will have to correct that, and there'll be a learning curve, and then it is really very ambitious to think, okay, I'm going to open up my PCS with everything that they do all at once. It's just, it sounds just so far-fetched for me. You know, it's incremental growth on the digital processes, and thank you for that. And then thanks to the Caribbean Development Bank, as Mona said, we have had the opportunity of actually collaborating in developing Barbados's a port community system with the support of our associate member Hudson Analytics, we also have a very important partner, which is the International Port Community System Association, which is also there to assist you in your journey towards PCS. Now, that said, it is our experience that even though there are off-the-shelf solutions out there in the market that you could purchase, and that there's firms that sell them, and they say, well, we developed this PCS for whatever port, but we'll adapt it to yours and it'll be great. I would, based on experience, recommend that if at all possible, you develop your own proprietary solution from zero, so that it can be tailor-made to your needs, like some of the ones that we have worked with, which have done that, as opposed to others that acquire an already made solution, and then it's really sort of rowing against the current. So there's also one of the limitations mentioned in these presentations where the technical or knowledge or ability of ports, national port authorities or whatever, to actually develop these products? Well, engage a firm to develop it from scratch, tailored for you. That would be my biggest recommendation, or my biggest sort of contribution here, is that when at all possible, because I realize it's not possible in every situation, try and do that. I'll also tell you that there's other, again, lending support to Krista's incremental approach. You could start with a collaborative decision-making software, for instance, to get into the digital world and to start streamlining and making the arrivals and departures, the calls on ships, more efficient, and you can grow from there. So those are my 2 bits. Again, thank you everyone for participating. And with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it to Krista and then to William, so that they can give us some final thoughts and a goodbye. So, Krista, you have the floor.
Thanks, Jorge, and many thanks to all of you who stuck around for the last hour. This was really an opportunity for the IDB to demonstrate not just what we're doing, but also a willingness to continue to support our region. We're a full service operation. So if you're from the private sector, or if you're from the public sector, or if you're somewhere, in between, we're happy to hear from you. I think that there are lots of challenges for the sector going forward in the next couple of years. We're still in this phase of industrial ports, cargo handling ports, and really the transition needs to be to kind of innovation hubs, and really getting a different, or adopting a different cultural approach to what the role is of a port in the city, or a role of the port in the country per se, and in the region. So really, we want to be a partner with you on that, and feel free to reach out with me to me directly. And if I can't help you, I'll certainly try to identify who can. Many thanks.
Thank you, Krista. William?
Thank you, Jorge. And I mentioned partnerships a good few times, and one important partner I didn't mention was the IDB. And at the moment, CDB is working with a colleague in Krista's office in Peru on work in developing or enhancing resilience in water and road transport in the OECS. And those countries aren't member countries of the IDB, so there's great opportunity to collaborate there as well through CDB. One important thing I want to say is, I said I'm a civil engineer, and often the engineers look at the infrastructure, and we might not consider the importance of what the infrastructure is serving as much as we should. And with regard to ports and the maritime sector, trade is one of the, well, it's the main thing. That's one of the main reasons they're existing, because of the nature of our islands. So looking at these connectivity issues, not just in isolation in individual countries, but also on a regional basis, that's kind of one thing I really want to encourage us to do. So with that, as Krista said, for IDB, I invite those listening who are from our borrowing member countries to contact us. There are lots of opportunities for us to help to support their development across the sector. Thank you very much.
No, thank you both again for sharing your expertise, for sharing your knowledge, your experience. I think that it proved very valuable. If you look at the chat for a minute, you'll see that there's many grateful individuals here representing several countries of the region. And I'm sure they see. Here's another thank you there just popped up. So seriously, thank you. Let's end this session thanking Mona Swoboda for her moderation, thanking Monica Blanco from the Secretariat for setting it up, thanking our technological partner Real ID for their support in the Zoom and the technology part. And I think that it would be a good idea, Krista and William, to think to do another one of these. I know that Krista is moving in January, and January is not it's a month where it's difficult. Perhaps we can think for something for March, for the end of the first quarter of next year, and do a part 2 of this webinar, where we can continue to speak about the topics that we have spoken about. And I'm sure that the public and the SIP community will be very appreciative of that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you goodbye. This will be the last webinar organized by the SIP Secretariat this year. I think it is our 12th this year, so that average is about one a month, and we will continue to do so on 2024. So you should get more invitations from us in the first quarter of next year for our webinars. In the meantime, I wish you all a great rest of the day, and happy Thanksgiving to those that celebrate it coming up later on this month. So until the next one, everybody, thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.